Hello, everyone. Welcome. This week, we are looking at the story of Moses. We are done with Genesis and we are into Exodus. And the main focus of this lesson is going to be on the name of God. I am, and the Lord, Jehovah. What are the meanings of this, and what principles and value can we extract from this name of God? And we'll look in the scriptures. Always the emphasis is on the scriptures, on what these may mean, and we're going to have to be comfortable with the idea that in the highest levels of studies that there still is debate amongst these things, but I believe that there's tremendous value that we can get from the primary theories. And you'll find at the conclusion of it all is I don't think it's worth coming down with a gavel and saying this is what it must mean, because there's value in both of the theories. And both of them are true in the sense that they represent a true principle about God. And God has many names. There's, I believe, a book that came out that goes over the different titles of God. And one of the things we talk about in philosophy is how most of the things that we name are actually a description of their function. And so many of the titles that an individual has, and in this case, even and how we interact with God and understand God through his names and titles, are descriptions of the roles that he plays. I'll often grab a random object, like one right here, and say, what is this? And the material components of what this is, we don't describe things linguistically by the material component very often. And as much as the material component may serve a function, it will be described as such. So this is a vomit bag, but I mean, it's silly, but you could put on your head and turn it into a hat. If it serves the function of a hat, it is that. But you could probably toss this and it becomes a toy or a frisbee, right? If it starts to spin. And it's interesting how things change based on the function that they are performing. And so the functionality that we are able to extract from these, what are considered, I believe, some of the most sacred names, especially in the Jewish tradition, the most sacred of names will be that which is spoken to Moses here in these chapters that we're examining, I am and Yahweh. Now, Yahweh has shown up from the very beginning when we see the word Lord in all caps. Many times God in all caps. This is a substitution for Jehovah or Yahweh. So we're going to look at all of those and the names, and it's going to be great. And there's some really powerful principles and truths that come as we look at these names. So we're introduced to this in Exodus chapter 3 in the episode of the burning bush. When Moses is communicating to God through the burning bush, we read in Exodus 3, and I believe it begins roughly around verse 13. And Moses said unto God, Behold, when I come unto the children of Israel, and shall say unto them, The God of your fathers hath sent me unto you, they shall say unto me, What is his name? What shall I say unto them? And God said unto Moses, I am that I am. And he said, Thou shalt say unto the children of Israel, I am hath sent you. And God said moreover unto Moses, Thus shalt thou say unto the children of Israel, The Lord God, Lord in all caps, Yahweh or Jehovah or Yehovah of your fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob, hath sent me unto you. This is my name forever. This is my memorial unto all generations. So what's in a name? What do we get behind the I am and the Lord? And it's really cool because these names are actually etymologically related to one another. And for those of you who are following me, you'll know that, I mean, this is primarily up on YouTube right now. We'll eventually get it up on some other resources. But instead of just telling you these things, I want to show you how you can do the same thing. So if this is the website Bible Hub, and you can find the verse here. So this is the verse that we just looked at, Exodus 3:14. You can pick different verses and read it that way. this is what happens when you click on parallel and you're getting all of these different translations right next to each other, and you can kind of compare the different translations. And there is a lot of security when everything is mostly the same. When in doubt, go with the consensus. I would be caution you to go find the most extreme translation and then attach to that, especially if it's trying to teach something a little bit more exotic. Don't be what was warned in the New Testament. Just, I think it was the Greeks who just desire some new thing. Yes, it's cool to sound like you have some secret information and something new, but I mean, these texts have been around for thousands of years and they have been combed over by many, 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 many scholars. And so there's one scholar that I keep happening upon that seems to invent something new with each one. And the Hebrew is sometimes good and the theology is sometimes lacking, I would say. But it's a problem that arises. I work in a field in psychiatry, and I'm blessed to have first invested mostly in theology and then in psychology because my grounding in theology has provided a solid foundation to be able to not be swayed by bad psychology. I've seen it go inversed where people learn psychology and get attached to that and then try to recreate their theology in the image of many of the things that have maybe been found in psychology. There's a lot of harmony, but every once in a while something mutates. So you can read here in Exodus 3:14, God said unto Moses, I am who I am. I am who I am, as opposed to I am that I am. Makes you wonder, what's the difference between I am who I am and that I am? I don't know if there's any grand insight between those, but it is something that maybe you can spend some time pondering. But as you go through each of these, you're going to see that that's a pretty consistent translation. It's either I am that I am or I am who I am. Interestingly enough, that another way of looking at this, and as we look at the etymology, we'll see that another way of reading I am who I am could be I will be, as opposed to I am, that there's something in the connotation of eya, the Hebrew word for I am, that has a forward momentum where it can mean to be, to exist, or to become. If we emphasize the to become component, it would allow you to translate this more. I will be who I will be. I will be that which I will be. Very, very interesting. So you can see eya, which is the I am, translated I will be or I am. And you can already see a little cheater right here as we look at the meaning of Yahweh or Jehovah or Yehovah. It is he is versus he will be, very closely related. And that leads to the ultimate question of like, why is that so important? Why is it so important for God to define himself as that which is, that which will be, that which becomes or causes to become? So that's what we're looking at, is the meaning of these. So if we go back to this, I often will click on the Hebrew here, and this breaks them all down. And if you want to do a more specific word search, I found yeah, you can click that, but I found that if you actually click the number, it gets you the better stuff. So haya, I believe aya or haya, this says the phonetic spelling is haya. And the meaning of this is to exist, to become, to come into being, to happen, or to occur. The other, it has the root hava, which is actually related in some way, I mean, a little more distantly, to the word we find in Eve for living. I believe it has something more, even in the connotation of that, we'll look at as something that means with breath, which again is a symbol of living. If you look at how this is translated, the word is mostly translated as came. Came. Why? What does this have to do with came or shall surely come to pass? So I often will look at other resources on top of this. And so if I go to Blue Letter Bible, and what I do is I will take this number here that we get 1961, and I will type that up here. H is for Hebrew, 1961. I just like the lexicons in the Blue Letter Bible are a little bit better, and they're a way of showing how things are translated, I think, are a little more fine-tuned here. So if we look at this, you can see the King James Version translates this haya as was or come to pass, came, has been, where happened, become, better for thee. So there, I have heard that there is something etymologically related to the idea of and it came to pass and yeah, this I am are correlated. And for those of you who have read the Book of Mormon, you'll know that the phrase and it came to pass shows over and over and over again. And I don't know if that is some grand mystery of and it came to pass and I am are intended to have some sort of meaning. It is a little bit different to just say I am as opposed to the I am that I am, or I will become, I will be what I will be. So we're going to keep looking at all these definitions, and then we're going to come back in and try to extract some of the potential intended meaning and virtue that we can get out of this name. You'll find again that the biblical usage to be, to become, you see that forward connotation, which is why there you have this I will be potential translation. To come into being, to be, or to exist. There's a lot of consensus on just the I am as a statement of I am existence. Haya, we'll see this again, to exist or to become, to come to pass. Always emphatic and not a mere copular auxiliary. I don't even know what those words mean. I'll confess my ignorance. I don't usually use the word copula. To fall out, to come to pass, to become, or to be comes from the Brown Drivers Briggs lexicon. And I really do always like Gesenius's Hebrew Chaldee lexicon. And they put at the very top to be or to exist. And if we scroll down, sometimes you can find some additional ones. This is a very, very long. I remember going through this earlier. I was like, this is extremely long. To become, to be made or done, to exist, to come to pass is another meaning they list on there, to be or to come to anyone. And so the reason why this is really broad is because we're not the only faiths out there. We have the Jewish people who put a tremendous amount of weight on the words of Moses. And this is the beginning of Moses's call. And this is God announcing to the world his own name. And this language that you have here, if you're taking that very literal, especially again, the Jewish people who put the emphasis on this first 5 books, they have really combed over the meaning of this quite a bit. The pondering of why God would say, this is my name forever, and this is my memorial unto all generations. By putting so much weight on that, it's something that says maybe we should give some extra attention to the meaning of this Eya or Haya in Jehovah. So the consensus ideas are I am, that I am. Obviously, that's the most common translation. To exist or have breath. That which exists has breath. In Hebrew, so this is the study light lexicon. They're probably the more fringe in the sense they contain some more fringe material. They're willing to go more out on the edge. They have the theory of they're moving off of a theory that's not fully accepted of a 2-letter root. This shows the 3-letter root. So we have hey, and you're gonna catch me on my Hebrew here. I'm gonna have to cheat. It's yod. So this is of Jehovah, yod, hey, vav. But this eya is built from hey, yod, hey. If we look at that, so you can see these letters here. To exist or have breath, that which exists has breath. The breath is the character of someone or something, just as man has character, so do objects. A generic verb with a wide application meaning to exist or to be. You can see that come to pass as well as associated with this. There is this connotation of breath because when we look at just this 2-letter root concept, the HH, if we put hey and hey next to each other, the word is translated as woe, a very heavy breath. Again, we have another to exist or have breath. That which exists has breath. In Hebrew thought, the breath is the character of something. So we kind of have a duplication here on this, but you can just see how the words are connected to this. There is an image of breath, which should make us go back to the notion of the breath of life, because one of the fundamental meanings of existence, putting the emphasis on existence, is that God is the ultimate existence, the ultimate reality. The other idea is I am that I am, or I will be, or what I will be is I will be that which will create being in all things. Many will interpret this. One of the most common interpretations of the meaning of I am is that God is the core existence, that from which all being springs from. It's almost like you could use breath symbolically or poetically. The original breath from which all breath comes from, the original life from which all life comes from, pure existence from which all existence comes from. So that would be one of the most conventional meanings in the I am that I am, the core of all existence, the core of all reality. Why would that be so significant? Why would that be so important for us to understand that God is associated with the core of all reality? Well, vanity of vanities, saith the preacher. Vanity of vanities, all is vanity. What does vanity mean? It means temporal. God is eternal. Eternal is my name is something we read in the Doctrine and Covenants. Everlasting is my name. God associates himself with the eternal. That which is true, if we go to the Doctrine and Covenants, section 93 definition, truth is things as they are, as they were, and as they are to come to pass. You can see again some of the meaning starting to evolve from this. So something in God being eternal and existing in a true way, a fully true way that's permanent, that is everlasting. So there is a flex or a connotation of the eternal attribute, which should be distinguished from man. Vanity of vanities, saith the preacher, vanity of vanities. What is your life in James? But a vapor of smoke that appeareth for a while and then vanisheth, right? That it creates this distinction between us as temporal, God as eternal, us as mortal, God as immortal, us as vain, and God as something that exists. Hey, yeah. So that's one of the core meanings. And you can see this in Moses's first encounter in the book of Moses, where he says, I know that I am nothing. And God shows him all of his works. I am that I am. I am the existence that brings all things into existence. I am that causes, or he is that which causes all to be, is kind of the idea of Jehovah when we get to the etymology there. But you can see God showing Moses all of his works and wonders, all that he has caused to be, all that came to pass. Again, see how all these are starting to fit together. It's almost like these narratives come out of these words. And I believe that that's partially, I believe personally, I mean, it's my theory that that's intended, is that there's kind of a full narrative packaged into these words because it's hard to define. And in fact, actually, one of the I will be what I will be is a way of saying, don't define me. There's been debates amongst religious leaders over the years. You can see this even in Islam. They don't like to convey God in image, don't paint a picture of God or of the Prophet Muhammad, because that is a form of idolatry, because it takes that which God is, which is infinite, and tries to put a container on it. So they would say, Greg Olson, don't do your paintings, because then you start to mistake what God actually is for this icon of it. Don't put an icon on God. Let God just be that which is beyond description and beyond. And I find some value in that. I don't want to make that too extreme. I'm not anti-painting. I get a lot of value from seeing those representations, but that's because I understand the caution to not let that representation become God. That would be a definition of idolatry, but to let it be a way of representing an attribute of God, but to remember that God is unsearchable. We learn that in Jacob. Jacob says that, like, how unsearchable are the depths of God. right? Don't put a container on God. Don't put a limiter on God. And the I will be what I will be. That would be one of the main messages there. God, again, Moses says, I am nothing, and God shows Moses all that he has caused to be and came to pass. There's something of extreme value there. And whether this is the full meaning of this, again, that may be the primary theory. I believe that's true. We should read the book of Moses. We should have a reverence and awe for God as the primary mover, to use a term coming from the Summa Theologica and the Catholic faith, coming from St. Thomas Aquinas, that God is the first mover that causes the motion of all things that we have in this life, using that very logical argument, right? We should have a higher awe and reverence towards God for his exalted state, and also to put us into the Moses-like humility, who Moses is described in the scriptures as the most meek man of all on the earth. And I think that comes as you understand that how valuable it is to that vanity of vanities, that everything in this life is temporal. Another way of looking at the temporal, I love this verse in Isaiah. It says, behold, the Lord God will help me. Who is he that shall condemn me? Lo, they all shall wax old as a garment. The moth shall eat them up. If it's temporal, does it exist? There is something phenomenologically in how that we describe things, and the things that are very fleeting are not as real. And because God is permanent, he is that which is most real, and he exists in the most pure phenomenological way because it's permanent. So there's, again, a connotation in that. The most powerful verse of pride comes from Ezekiel 28, verse 2. I think it's the most powerful representation of it. Son of man, say unto the prince of Tyrus, thus saith the Lord God, because thine heart is lifted up, and thou hast said, I am a God, I sit in the seat of God, in the midst of the seas, yet thou art a man, and not God, though thou set thine heart as the heart of God. Now we see a huge contrast in the whole story of Exodus, which we're going to focus on next week, with the Pharaoh who, like this prince of Tyrus, puts himself in the position of God, the seat of God. I get to determine what reality is. I get to determine what truth is. That's the claim of postmodern man right now, and the culture of our Babylon here in Western society, and for many around the world, because I think these are archetypal. There's nothing new under the sun. And just as we're reading this in Ezekiel, we see this in Pharaoh, we see this from the beginning of time, that there is this fundamental pride of man putting himself in the position of God. I get to determine what is real, true, and meaningful. Or do we surrender to God that which exists, that which is, that which causes reality to be reality? Or do we push and force our reality upon God and create conflict? And we see that conflict reach its most incredible drama in the Exodus story. So be mindful of that. When we say that God exists, think of Moses and his submission to God, and Pharaoh was unwilling to submit to God, and how existence and reality and truth are all part of this phenomenological chord, what it means to exist in the I am sense. Personally, I've found a tremendous amount of value in this type of introspection and meditation. I actually encountered a greater depth of that when I was in college and studying a little bit more of Buddhism. And I don't want to be totally distracted by that, but there is a fun little tangent if you ever want to look at the uh, inner teachings of Buddhism. And there's a lot of writings that they use to note about non-existence, and they put non-existence in a state that is very uh, desirable. And there's certainly are differences, and we could spend a whole 5 hours looking at the differences between Buddhism and Christianity and the nuance. But there is a very peculiar one, especially when we're talking about the idea of God as that which is existence, pure existence, and how that has some interesting overlaps. So this is just a fun little ChatGPT search, but there is tension, right? It's not a perfect fit, but we can say Christian metaphysics is that God created all things and that they depend on God at every moment. And so that's this idea that there is something valuable that in Buddhism that says that things don't exist on their own and that there's something fictitious about this reality, that this reality has some form of illusion, where we have an ignorance that blinds us to that, and that we need to surrender to God. And the idea in Buddhism is to not be attached to your own perspective, to your own ego, to your own concept of reality. You need to surrender to encounter ultimate reality. So, like I said, I don't want to belabor that too much. I personally found some value when that was a part of my studies, but only in as much as it was already integrating what I already believed with Christianity. And everything there may be a little bit more philosophical and esoteric, and I apologize for that, but it reaches nice and wonderful simplicity when you just read in Moses chapter 15 about Christ, who said, "Yea, even so he shall be led, crucified and slain, the flesh becoming subject, even unto death, the will of the Son being swallowed up in the will of the Father. I am, I exist." Well, we have that part in each of us that says, well, I think I'm important, or this is what I want, this is what I think is true or valuable, worth motivating me and moving me forward. And God may say, I am that I am, and we need to surrender to that. We must be willing to be swallowed up in the will of the Father, surrender our passions, surrender our truth. Even this idea of I speak my truth, that we need to be able to surrender our truth to the truth, our concept of reality and existence. So I know I belabored that, but this is belabored only because this is the name of God. And I think I'll even post another one this week on Elohim. That one's way more philosophical. So if you survive this and want to bite into a deeper, uh, bite deeper into the depths of the meaning of God, I have a lecture on Elohim that's about an hour long. How we can go into that. So Jehovah, as we already hinted to, is etymologically related to what we just went over in the I am. And the most simple way of looking at that, again, I just like how it's put up here, is that Ehyeh, Haya, I am, I will be. The extra Y here is believed to just change kind of like the pronoun or the tense of it to he is or he will be. Again, there is debate on this, so we have to remember to not just come down with firm or be like, this is what it means. Rather say, we don't know what it means, but these are from the research and scholars, this is the most common. And so it's interesting that there are these different meanings behind it. We kind of went over the scholarly consensus of Jehovah or Yahweh, meaning he is or he causes to be. The other would be that he causes to exist. That's what we just focused on as well. And he will be with you. So this is what we're going to conclude with, is this is another interpretation. But before we go fully into that, let's look at this. So these four letters, YHWH, most commonly pronounced by experts as Yahweh, Yahweh, are going to be the most common ones. If you went to the Blue Letter Bible, you can see that maybe it's Jehovah. These are theories. So you've probably heard me emphasize that multiple times now. If you are wondering why I'm moving around in the background, it's because my computer might die and I need to plug it in, cause it to continue to be the Jehovah. We don't know the exact pronunciation. We do have our anglicized version, which is Jehovah. That's just a silly thing that I guess I don't know if I'm not taking the blame for that, but I don't know where in the ancestors they just didn't know how to pronounce the Y sound, but it's very common. It's to me, it's kind of funny. It'd be like me saying, "Hi, my name is Derek," and your alphabet has a D sound and an R sound, and yet instead of just saying the D and the R sound, you decide to say, "Oh, Barrick." Or Bedrick. Be like, no, I said Derek. It's like you could pronounce it right, but you choose not to. We have all sorts of funny things like that in English, where in French it's crepe, but many people say crepe, and it's just this obvious mispronunciation. Barcelona, but we call it Barcelona. That one I'll argue because it does sound a lot better to say Barcelona. Sorry if I offend anyone there, but that's just my personal opinion. But again, we're just mispronouncing it. Japan is a mispronunciation of Ippon, and so we transliterate the Y's into J's. But if you're sticking more with an original Hebrew, it's probably something closer to Yahweh, Yahweh, or Jehovah that could be the more original pronunciation. But again, this is your test. We don't know. Remember that we don't know. So look at how many times this shows up 6,510 times. It is like the most common noun in all of scriptures. What does it mean? The existing one, the proper name of the one true God. I listened to a Jewish rabbi. He was saying that Elohim is a more broad description to God, and Jehovah or Yahweh is this very intimate, this is the name given to the covenant people specifically. That might be a nice introspection on why there would be a difference in the title. We do know in history that if you were to look at the texts that come from the Canaanites, which we have older Canaanite texts than we do of Hebrew texts, that there is an L in the Canaanite. So the scholars would say that the term El and Elohim is an adoption from the Canaanite text, and it just shows how history works. And I'm not totally criticizing that. It's just we're one dig away from finding, oh, we have an older one from the Hebrews, so I guess the Canaanites got it from the Hebrews and not the other way around. And history gets rewritten all of the time based on the latest dig. But the latest dig says that Canaanite, we have the earlier Canaanite than we do Hebrew at this time. So, Jehovah, the proper name of the supreme God. You can go through and read this if you want to. Very, very long. This has been thoroughly, thoroughly researched, and the self-existence or eternal, and again, how it's related to what we just went over in the Eya or the Haya. The one thing that I want to point out, not to generate any sort of sacrilege, the scholars there are those who go a little farther out, and it's more criticized among scholars. I'm sure because a lot of the scholars are Jewish, knowing that this is the name given to the Jewish people in the book of Moses is certainly they're not going to be super happy about this. And again, the scholars don't necessarily accept this as an interpretation. I'm pointing out because I find this to be one of the most incredible coincidences. And I personally believe that it's not a coincidence. I believe that this is a testament, that all things testify that there is a Christ. The characters for Jehovah, for Yahweh, we can see this. Again, I have to keep cheating. It's Yod, Hey, and Vav, Hey. So when you look at the Paleo or ancient Hebrew icons that exist, and this is a valid thing. There's not debate on on these images. There can be some debate on of what they represent more symbolically, but literally, this is a picture of an arm. That Yod is an arm, and Hey is a man with his hands, and it represents a lot of times just like a look or behold, reveal, or breath. And so the Yod represents a hand, a work, or throw, or worship. And Vav, this V, depicts a tent peg. So again, I'm not saying this is what it means. I'm just saying, look at the coincidence that you can say that Jehovah, the tetragrammaton, these 4 letters, the sacred letters that are the Lord, this memorial to the people, are look at the nail and look at the hand, or look at the hand and look at the nail, and more in that order. That's pretty remarkable that we can see that. Uh, to me, that if that is just a coincidence, what a coincidence that is that's what the iconography of the Lord is this image of looking at a hand and looking at a nail, a miraculous, coincidental, um, if that's your perspective, but I would say a wonderful, miraculous testament to the Lord Jesus Christ, who was slain on the cross and had nails driven through his hands. Um, The final interpretation, that is a theory I just deleted, so you can't see that it's proven on ChatGPT, but you're welcome to search it yourself, is the theory that instead of the I am that I am, is that it could represent something more like I am with you. It could be like an intensifier, that I am with you. And the reason that this theory shows up is because this shows up in the book of Exodus. If you just actually go a little bit above this in verse 12 in Exodus 3, certainly I will be with thee. A similar etymological root in this statement. So God promises Moses that he will be with him. In the book of Moses, in the same event where God is showing him everything, we have in Moses chapter 1, verse 26, and lo, I am with thee, even unto the end of thy days. What about Abraham? Now, this is Genesis 26. This is to Isaac. And the Lord appeared. Oh, actually, I believe this this might actually be to Jacob. Is this the pillar? Let's see. And the Lord appeared. Okay, we do get this actually as well to Jacob, I guarantee. So this is where it's cool. So I'm in my mistake, it proves a point. So this is, and the Lord appeared the same night and said, I am the God of Abraham, thy father. Fear not, for I am with thee. Genesis 26:24. Watch how this works. So if we look this up using this, and again, I know it might not be the most entertaining thing to watch, but I'm showing you how you can do this research on your own. Genesis 26:24. And now he says that I am with you. In this case, the I am with you is a different term. But the theory still is there. It would suggest that there is something, there's going to be variation in the Hebrew. There are going to be times where the I am with you statement is going to be translated as using that same eya or haya phrase. I am with thee even to the end of thy days. In Moses, we read just barely in Genesis 26, we get when Jacob sees the vision of the ladder, very similar. We're going to have Jacob, God speak to Jacob during that vision that he has and say that I am with you. So it's very, very fascinating that we have this. This is Genesis 28. You can see Jacob's ladder showing up here. And in verse 15, and behold, I am with thee and will keep thee in all places where thou goest. Seeing the theme here. In Abraham, behold, I will lead thee by my hand. I will take thee to put my name upon thee, even the priesthood. And again, if you took the Jewish notion that the interaction with Yahweh, that this is the covenantal name that we make with God, that you're somehow interacting with that. So there is this idea that each time we have the Abrahamic covenant showing up, that we have this idea of Jehovah. It's not Elohim, it's Jehovah. Again, I'm not trying to create any sacrilege there by the personages of God with what our doctrine is, but it's a way of moving to a more intimate relationship with God. And when we look at it that way in the covenantal, it's God's covenant through his covenant name, maybe theoretically an expression of God, I am with you. He will be with you. always. Now, whether that's what the name is intended to convey or mean, the answer is, again, just make sure you're paying attention. We don't know. But I also add, not in some nihilistic way, I don't care what it means, because I'm okay saying that this interpretation is a nice theory and represents something that is true, with principles that can transform your relationship with God and bring you closer to the truth. And this interpretation that we're giving right here, whether that's what is conveyed in the name of the Tetragrammaton and Yahweh and Jehovah, I don't know. But isn't this true? Can you just take a moment and reflect on how, like, just how powerful this is? The idea that God in the covenant, in covenantal language, is always covenanting, I will be with you. To Abraham, I will lead you by my hand. We went through Isaac, we went through Jacob, we're at Moses. And for those of us who make that covenant in the priesthood, in Doctrine and Covenants 84, and whoso receiveth you, there will I be also, for I will go before your face. I'll be on your right hand and on your left, and my spirit shall be in your hearts, and my angels round about to bear you up. Whoso receiveth you receiveth me. These are the images that are associated with it. And I hope that as we contemplate the name, knowing that we may not fully know what that means, I hope that we can interact and come into some, I guess, just have some remembrance of these very true principles that God exists. He is God and He is above us. We are nothing and He is everything. He is the source of everything. And that ought to dictate a tremendous amount of our relationship. But we also get out of this, Moses says, I am a son of God, and sees extraordinary value in this interesting paradox that you see in Moses. And maybe that's interesting that that paradox is still there, even in the holy name of God Himself. But again, there's truth in both of those. And for me, one of the greatest representations of this as well comes from Jesus. Lo, I am with you always, even to the end of the world. So do not doubt that God is with you. Do not doubt that God is, He is, I am, causes all to be. And what does He cause to be? And we can look at that purely from a perspective of material. He caused all existence to be, but what He caused to be is you. He created you. He created life. And He created this world, and He created a redemption through His sacrifice, through His love. If you want to say God exists, well, what is the nature of God existence? And you would then go to the words of John where he says God is love. Love exists. God's love exists. That's the fundamental existence. If you read the entire narrative from Genesis to Revelation, the message would be, in the idea of God exists, is a way of reading that as well through the entire biblical narrative, is that love, God's love exists. It's always with you. Nay, in all these things we are more than conquerors through Him that loved us. For I am persuaded that neither death, nor life, nor angels, nor principalities, nor powers, nor things present, nor things to come, nor height, nor depth, nor any other creature shall be able to separate us from the love of God which is in Christ Jesus our Lord. I am with you to the end. Nothing can abolish the existence of God and God's love, which is the fundamental trait. And you have to stick with the whole narrative to get to that point. And perhaps this is what it means, and who knows what it means, but I think that as you contemplate that and sit with the Spirit there, I believe that that is the fundamental message that we get from God, our Heavenly Father, from Christ, our Creator, is that I am with you and I love you. That has been the message from the beginning. That is the message from the beginning and the end. And that is what I most closely associate with God. And perhaps something through these ideas are able to stick with you and maybe help you and change you to feel a closer connection with God. So I hope that the Spirit may do that for you. God bless you in all that you all do, and God help you and be with you always. Remember that. Until next time.